Namaskar, good afternoon to everyone. Welcome to the webinar on Comparative World Literature organized by Hindi University, West Bengal. It is my privilege to extend a warm welcome to the Honorable Vice Chancellor of Hindi University, Professor Nandini Sahu ma'am, esteemed guests and distinguished speakers, Dr. Meenakshi Mohan and Professor Radha Chakravarty ma'am. It is my pleasure to extend a warm welcome to both of you to this webinar. We are truly honored to have you join us today, sharing your profound insights and expertise in this rich and diverse field of study. So now, I must say, it is my great pleasure to introduce the Honorable Vice Chancellor of Hindi University, Professor Nandini Sahu ma'am, who is a renowned academician, poet, and creative writer. With 23 books to her credit and a best-selling author on Amazon, she has received numerous accolades, including double gold medals, the Literary Award Gold Medal from the Vice President of India, the Michael Madhusudan Academy Award, and the Lifetime Achievement Award in the year 2024. Her latest publication, Medusa, and recent honors such as Tagore Samman 2025 and Honorary Fellowship from the International Academy of Ethics underscore her literary and academic excellence. Professor Nandini Sahu's expertise in new literatures, critical theory, and folklore cements her reputation as a leading authority in Indian English literature and education. Without any delay, now I would like to request Professor Nandini Sahu ma'am for the inaugural speech. Ma'am, please.
Thank you so much, Dr. Paromita, for that generous introduction. I invite Professor Radha Chakravarty and Dr. Meenakshi Mohan to the Hindi University Special Lecture Series as two distinguished speakers on comparative world literatures with their respective areas of research interest. Uh, Professor Radha Chakravarty is one of the most reputed scholars in Indian academia. I have lived in Delhi for 2 decades. Since 2005 to 2025, I was in Delhi, and I have experienced, I have seen the way she has been actively engaged in many activities in the city and otherwise in many parts of the country. She is a very kind and a compassionate human being. She is very much loved and appreciated by all. And I have attended few of her lectures in India International Center and India Habitat Center. Also, we have attended a couple of seminars together. So I know her research. I have seen her commitment and her dedication to creative writing, critical writing, teaching, and her commitment as a teacher in the Ambedkar University during her tenure as a professor there. She was impactful as a teacher. She was much loved by her students. And she has been one of those people who have inspired me. So, madam, I welcome you to be a part of our Hindi University lecture series. Once you have spoken, I'll be in a position to probably ask you a couple of questions if I have any, or maybe take your suggestions for our Hindi University, lecture series or our syllabus design or things like that. And as far as Dr. Meenakshi Mohan is concerned, I met her on social media probably some 10 years ago when Facebook and all these things they came up. And then I got to know that somebody named Meenakshi Mohan has been actively writing. She is into a whole lot of research and poetry groups. She contributes to many important anthologies, and also she has edited many important anthologies on poetry, diaspora poetry, Indian poetry, poetry in translation, even short stories she has contributed. And recently she hosted the Setu Literature Festival in her own country. She hosted Setu Literature Festival, which was a huge success. I was looking at all those discourses and the appreciation of the participants for Dr. Meenakshi Mohan. And she has been chatting with me regarding this lecture series. When we started the lecture series in January, I sent messages to Radha Madam and Meenakshi Madam. Many of them would like to be a part of it. And she has been sending me messages off and on. I would like to speak on this topic, on that topic. So, she has been interested in our lecture series. She's following the series. She's listening to the speakers. I think she had joined. So I welcome the Professor Radha Chakravarty and Dr. Meenakshi Mohan to Hindi University Special Lecture Series as two of our speakers. I'm sure that your intervention and your lectures are going to enrich this lecture series. And about this particular lecture series, let me put it on record here that Dr. Paramita, the convener of the entire series, she has been inviting many speakers in the country. She's taking, clues from me, numbers from me. Some of the speakers are from our own research. And the speakers are actively engaging with each other, and also they are engaging with us. We at Hindi University are planning to launch an MA program in comparative literature where your lectures will be instrumental and helpful for us as a part of our background study or part of our homework. And we are recording, we're making it our YouTube as well. We are putting you in our newsletters. And we have launched Fuji's Hindi University Journal of Interdisciplinary Studies. The first issue is more or less ready, and it will be launched in the month of December. The first issue of the journal is again comparative world literatures. So if you would like to contribute a paper after this lecture for that particular issue, December issue, please feel free to do so. Otherwise, later on, Dr. Paramita will be in touch with you. We are also going to take out an anthology of comparative world literatures where your research papers will be accepted if they will be published. Yes, so once again, I'm very happy to have both of you, my very dear friends, Professor Radha Chakravarty and Dr. Meenakshi Mohan, and eminent scholars of the country. We welcome you to Hindi University Special Lectures Series from West Bengal. Namaskar.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am. Meenakshi Madam is here.
Yes, I had enough time.
Yes, so what's the time for you?
It's 6:30 in the morning.
Early morning. Yes, we can see that morning freshness in you. Right, Paramita. So maybe you can invite one of the lecturers.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. Now, I am really delighted to introduce Professor Radha Chakravarty, ma'am, who was a distinguished academic affiliated with B.R. Ambedkar University, Delhi, where she served as a professor of comparative literature and translation studies. Renowned for her scholarly contributions, she is a prolific poet, critic, and translator with an impressive array of publications. Her recent works include subliminal poems, Mahashweta Devi, writer, activist, visionary, and Qazi Nazrul Islam selected essays. With over 20 books to her credit, Professor Chakravarty's over encompasses translations of eminent Bengali writers such as Rabindranath Tagore, Bankim Chandra Chatterjee, Qazi Nazrul Islam, and Mahashweta Devi, alongside critical explorations of Tagore's works, women's writing, and gender issues. She has curated several anthologies of South Asian literature and co-edited The Essential Tagore, a notable volume nominated as Book of the Year in 2011, reflecting her significant impact on literary scholarship and cross-cultural dialogue. Today, her lecture will be focused on textual cartographies, translation, and comparative world literatures. Now, I would like to request Professor Radha Chakravarty, Madam, for her enlightening speech. Please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Paramita. I want to begin by expressing my gratitude to Professor Nandini Sahu, Hindi University, and the entire organizing team for inviting me to speak here on a subject so close to my heart. I congratulate your university for the new work that you're proposing to initiate, and I'm very happy to be in at the beginning, so to speak. And I look forward to seeing your new venture grow from strength to strength. So all my best wishes and congratulations in advance. I will speak today about translation and comparative world literature. I will speak from the space of translation because this is where some of my areas of work converge. And I feel that in a society like ours, I don't think we can talk of comparative world literature unless we also talk about translation. So I've called my lecture Textual Cartographies, Translation and Comparative World Literature. During a visit to Delhi in 2018, Ngugi Thiong'o recounted the influence of Rabindranath Tagore on his own anti-colonial understanding of language. He narrated an anecdote about a writer who boasted to Tagore about all the foreign languages that he knew. Tagore asked the writer, "Do you know your mother tongue?" When the man admitted he didn't, Tagore replied, and I quote, "When you don't know your mother tongue, you don't know any language at all," unquote. Recalling the incident, Ngugi acknowledges, "My own work on language and power was in a sense an elaboration of that Tagorean sentiment." So those of us who are working with post-colonial literature, and I think it is very much a part of literary studies now, right from bachelor's level, I think we're all familiar with the name of Ngugi. But here itself we see an instance of comparative world literature where we have this conversation between Ngugi and Tagore. Ngugi's anecdote reminds us of the continued importance of Tagore for the reimagining of language and literature as potential driving forces in our contemporary world. Tagore's remarks on the importance of the mother tongue, when seen in relation to his own vast project of bringing the world together in one nest, and I'm quoting from the motto of Vishwabharati, his vast project of bringing the world together in one nest in his dream university at Shantiniketan, point to a dialectical relationship between the universal and the particular, the vast world and the little nest. This dialectic is also central to debates about world literature today. Drawing upon the insights of Rabindranath Tagore, this lecture projects the transformative potential of languages in general and translation in particular as the key to a radical reconceptualization of a comparative world literature for the future. I also focus on multilingualism and interdisciplinarity as aspects of this reimagined notion of comparative world literature. At this moment, works in translation from South Asian languages have acquired great international visibility since Gitanjali Shree's Ret Samadhi, Banu Mushtaq's Heart Lamp, and so on shot to fame with the Booker Prize. At such a juncture, it is worth asking some new questions about the way world literature has been traditionally defined and the ways in which South Asian writing can potentially alter the map. Traditional notions of world literature are premised on the idea of separate nation states, each with its own separate language. But my aim here is to question this way of mapping literary history. Maps, after all, are not just lines on a globe or atlas. Maps are drawn in our minds and defined by borders that demarcate separate areas named as continents, nations, and their spatio-political subdivisions into regions, districts, cities, villages, neighborhood, and so on. And I think Google Maps has become so familiar to us that we know that we can zoom in and zoom out at will, and borders kind of expand and shrink at the touch of a finger. Cartography, the practice of map making, has never been an innocent activity. It has always functioned as a way of expressing worldviews and epistemologies and been associated with changing power relations in the world. And we have to think about the Renaissance period or the colonial period and so on to think about the link between cartography, map making, and power. As Gayatri Chakravarty Spivak says, and I quote, "Comparison assumes a level playing field, and the field is never level." So we're talking asymmetries of power here. Instead of the conventional way of mapping the literary world in our minds, I propose reading strategies that indicate alternative textual cartographies by focusing on the transnational and trans-regional in translation. Such cultural border crossings are never exclusively about language and literature. They call for an awareness of the worlding of texts and demand a recognition of the relationship between language and power. They compel us to ask some crucial questions. How can an alternative conception of comparative world literature and a revaluing of translation help us remap our world in ways that are not static but dynamic? In what ways can this process be interventionist? These are some of the questions at the heart of my paper. So I'll speak here briefly about the idea of world literature. In 1827, Goethe had announced to Eckermann the advent of the epoch of world literature, of Weltliteratur, after the demise of national literatures. But as David Damrosch in Goethe coins a phrase asks, which literature and whose world is Goethe speaking of? Goethe, according to Damrosch, sees world literature as less a set of relationships than a network where nations exchange their intellectual treasures. A sense of canonicity is involved here. Damrosch, in turn, takes world literature to refer to all literary works circulating beyond their culture of origin, in translation or in the original language. But as Damrosch recognizes, texts that travel beyond their culture of origin meet with varying forms of reception in different places and at different times. Hence, the circumstances affecting the production, circulation, and reception of the selected texts assume great significance. Damrosch, Apter, and Moretti, among others, open up significant debates about world literature along these lines. May I take just a minute off? Somebody just rang the doorbell. I'm very sorry. Really sorry about that. So to continue what I was saying, in India, it was Tagore who brought the idea of world literature into our own literary discourse when he coined the term Vishwa Sahitya, even before he won the Nobel Prize in 1914. In 1907, invited by the Indian National Council of Education in Calcutta to deliver a lecture on comparative literature, he asserted that he would prefer the term Vishwa Sahitya, which literally translates, of course, as world literature. But Tagore's idea of Vishwa Sahitya is more complex and comprehensive than what the English term world literature is generally taken to imply. He declares, and I quote, "Just as this earth is not the sum of patches of land belonging to different people, so literature is not the mere total of works composed by different hands. From this narrow provincialism, we must free ourselves. We must strive to see the work of each author as a whole, that whole as a part of man's universal creativity, and that universal spirit in its manifestations through world literature. Now is the time to do so." In this important statement, Tagore in this lecture emphasizes the idea of universality, which transcends the narrow, circumscribed spheres of the local. He says, and I quote, "Man throughout the whole of history is incessantly at work to fulfill his deepest purposes and to unite himself with the all. It is he, I say, who will strive to see in history not the local and in the individual, but the eternal and universal man. Likewise, what really claims our attention in world literature is the way in which the soul of man expresses its joy." Unquote. So this is a broad sweeping vision that Tagore expresses when speaking of world literature. But alongside this sweeping vision, Tagore also celebrates the minute and the particular. In his vision, the same spirit that animates the cosmos finds its manifestation in the atomic, concrete details of our individual lives. In Gitanjali, for instance, he says, "The same stream of life that runs through my veins night and day runs through the world and dances in rhythmic measures." Tagore's ideas, in fact, proved inspirational for the introduction of comparative literature as an academic discipline in India. And here, the pioneering role played by Buddhadev Bose at Jadavpur University is well known. In Tagore's dynamic vision of the link between all things great and small, his ideas of connectedness and constant movement, can we find a new paradigm for a comparative world literature for our own times? In this paradigm, what role can language and translation play? These are questions I will try to address here. To speak now about comparative literature, I was speaking about world literature so far. Comparative literature is what I'll focus on for a bit now. In our universities, single language literature departments are the norm, and our imaginations are trained to consider individual linguistic literary traditions in isolation. But this pedagogic practice of compartmentalization does not reflect our actual cultural reality. For in South Asia, we inhabit a multilingual realm marked by heterogeneous interactive processes across diverse languages and literatures. This has been our history through the centuries and across the region. A polyglot sensibility characterized our pre-modern literary environment, and fluid interchanges between different languages were the order of the day. In fact, we possessed what G.N. Devi calls, and I'm quoting, "we possessed a translating consciousness," unquote. A shared awareness of the possibility of crossing linguistic, geographical, cultural, and social borders. There was also rich traffic between oral and written traditions. In a pedagogical and scholarly space, where single language literatures dominate academia and the literary imagination, the richness of this polyglot heritage gets lost. It also gets eclipsed by the dominant national and global discourses of today, which foreground isolated monolingual literary spaces with fixed and clearly demarcated borders. The idea of comparative literary studies, though, challenges the fixity of such borders and destabilizes the process of compartmentalization that keep linguistic literary traditions in separate zones, ignoring their intermingled histories. Instead, comparative literature can offer us a dynamic, interactive model that privileges dialogue, negotiations with otherness, and the recognition of differences. And Professor Meenakshi Mohan belongs to the diaspora. I'm sure she will speak of mobility and the migrancy of texts as well as people. So I think it's a privilege to have her here. For comparison compels us to think across different kinds of borders, linguistic, geographical, cultural, and historical or temporal. The comparative approach is no doubt eminently appropriate for a multilingual culture like our own. But on a larger scale and seen in a wider perspective, it is also of great value in reimagining the idea of world literature along comparative and relational lines. As Tagore, Buddhadev, Bose, and others after them recognized, the discipline of comparative literature is essential for literary studies to address the cultural and linguistic complexity of the Indian context. According to Amir Dev, India's many literary languages form a plenum comparable to European literature. And different Indian languages are always colored by other languages in use among them. So languages interact with each other, bleed into each other in our society. In the essay Comparative Literature in India, he says, and I quote, in a multilingual situation, there cannot be a true appreciation of a single literature in absolute isolation, unquote. Likewise, Shishir Kumar Das declares, and I quote, the very structure of Indian literature is comparative. Comparison, of course, brings to light similarities, overlaps, or common concerns, but it also throws differences into relief. Yet, the comparative method in literary studies demands more than a merely descriptive enumeration of similarities and differences between two texts in different languages or two authors who write in different languages. Rather, it requires that we become aware of the purpose of making comparisons and the particular context, whether historical, social, ideological, or theoretical, that underlies the comparative approach. Hence, the ground for comparison becomes very important. In other words, comparative study involves being alive to crucial questions of purpose, context, and history, because literary texts do not exist in a vacuum. Comparison is always about relationships. Because it is grounded in history, the act of comparison inevitably brings us face to face with asymmetries of power and hierarchies of language. In ancient times, for instance, Sanskrit was the elite language in large parts of our culture, while other languages were seen as subsidiary or inferior. This reminds us of Sheldon Pollock's discussions of the Sanskrit cosmopolis. In the medieval period, Persian acquired ascendancy in large parts of this region until colonization replaced these elite privileged languages with English as the new language of power and control. Today, long after political independence, the legacy of colonialism and the dominance of English continues in India and also globally, along with multiple other hierarchies of language within our own cultural spaces. But comparative literature as a discipline also has the potential to displace these prevalent hierarchies by focusing on the multiple linguistic traditions that have always flourished in our culture, beyond the dominant languages of power. The range of our comparative practices can be diversified and expanded through the conscious choices that scholars and translators make. We can choose, for instance, to open up conversations among different Indian or South Asian languages and literatures, instead of always using English as a via media or point of reference. Collaborative research methods can be adopted, dismantling the fetishization of individual scholarship. The neglect of oral traditions and dying languages can also be addressed through the discipline of comparative literature, which can bring orality and writing together in a comparative frame. This has immense implications for literary historiography of the South Asian region and also for the archiving and preservation of texts in endangered languages. Such possibilities of choice imply the comparative's agency and the potential of interventionist reading that the comparative approach has to offer. The scholar or practitioner can use comparison in ways that are potentially radical because they can empower us to interrogate dominant discourses, pedagogical methods, and scholarly perspectives to open up newer alternative ways of looking at our own cultural world and beyond. What this requires, though, and this is very important, is a collective will to alter the state of things. And this is where our participation and responsibility becomes central. It is this collective sense of purpose that Rabindranath Tagore has in mind in renaming the discourse of comparative literature as Vishwa Sahitya. In this renaming, it is surely significant that Rabindranath Tagore chooses the indigenous word Sahitya over the English word literature. We may think the two mean the same, but actually, Tagore was aware that the resonances are different. The English word literature draws upon the idea of access to literacy, but the word Sahitya draws on the term Sahit, meaning being with or acting together. Rather than separateness, Sahit emphasizes relationships and a shared will to action. Tagore says, and I quote, "Whether as individuals or as societies, to the extent we remain without a link to the whole, to that extent are we barbaric. Therefore, in civilized societies, if the state is affected, broadly speaking, every individual is also affected. If the society is constricted, every individual's self-blossoming is stunted. The more liberal man's composition of his larger world, the more he is at liberty to express his humanity," unquote. In adopting comparison as a way of connecting the local with the national, regional, and global, perhaps we would be wise to take a page out of Tagore's book. For his idea of Vishwa Sahitya challenges the dominant Eurocentric models of comparative world literature. Instead of accepting prevalent Western definitions of the category, we can choose to include in world literature, and this is where syllabus formation also becomes crucial. We can choose to include in world literature such texts in South Asian languages that can lend themselves to multiple levels of comparison, not always necessarily involving English, French, Sanskrit, or other elite languages. It is important too to connect with the wider world through translation of world literatures into South Asian languages. So not always translating into English, but translating the world into South Asian languages to establish interconnectivity. This approach also draws upon Gayatri Chakravarty Spivak's idea of planetarity, which challenges the hierarchical discourse of the global with an alternative model of privileging non-Euro-American languages in multiple ways. At this point, I will speak about translation, world literature, and the literary humanities, which is the final section of my lecture. To engage with our multilingual reality and read comparatively across the diverse languages and geographical spaces in our region, we need to move beyond monolingual skills. For comparative literature in South Asian contexts, therefore, translation can play a vital role. Bilingual or polyglot scholarship and creative practice, once taken for granted in our cultures, but now a rarer phenomenon, needs to be reprioritized. But since an individual scholar with a limited number, since an individual scholar can exercise competence in only a limited number of languages at best, because after all, no one can be an expert in all languages, translation offers a valuable way of providing wider access to texts in multiple South Asian languages. Translation can be a ground for connecting scholars from different linguistic backgrounds, opening up possible channels of communication across varied linguistic literary units in our cultural spaces. Hence, alongside the comparative approach, translation also needs to be revalued as something that can potentially enrich knowledge production in our part of the world. In fact, there has always been a rich tradition of translation in South Asia, and since ancient times, we had our own ways of conceptualizing the practice. So I'm not going here into Indian translation theories, which is a rich and a varied field, but it is worth reminding ourselves that we had our own tradition and our own theoretical formulations. The question of fidelity to the original source that dominates Western theoretical discourse and the general reader's attitude to translated works is something that we need to question. Because in pre-modern polyglot cultures of South Asia, faithfulness to the original was certainly not the norm for translation. In our multilingual ethos, text travels through translation in a fluid, flexible way, often undergoing many transformations in the process. P. Lal describes this process as transcreation. Perhaps transcreation is a term we need to take seriously when we speak of the creative potential of translation. So the conventional dichotomy between creative writing and translation, I would question that, and I think P. Lal is a very good model for thinking about translation as itself a creative process in its own right. Most current theories of translation that circulate in academia today come from the West, but they don't always reflect the linguistic and literary scenario of the South Asian region. Dominant theories in the discourse of translation studies encourage us to think of literary translation only in terms of written and print cultures. Given our rich history of oral and performative traditions, though, we need to expand our definition of translation to include orality as well. And here, Professor Nandini Sahu, with all her work on folklore, I'm sure can contribute very richly. There is a wealth of work to be done here. The quest for lost or dying linguistic and literary traditions deserves more attention. Such adventures involve a collective will towards preserving our heritage through concerted efforts at exploration, research, archiving, and dissemination. One wishes that the reimagination of comparative world literature would incorporate, in place of universals, greater awareness of difference and heterogeneity, as well as underlying commonalities and shared concerns. In place of exclusiveness, this new paradigm would promote greater inclusiveness, a less hierarchical approach, and the will to reach out to our others. For it would recognize the fracture at the heart of the term human, exploding the myth of homogeneity, to confront the multiplicities and cultural, social, and historical specificities that characterize our lived experience. This version of world literature would also take a wide view of space, involving alternative geographies that do not necessarily divide the world into global north and south, or into isolated nation states, encouraging us instead to think across borders in ways that can be collaborative. Such practices demand an interdisciplinary approach. In place of the polarization of science versus the humanities, and we were just talking about ChatGPT a little while before the session started, in place of science versus the humanities, I think such practices call for the use of scientific methods and perspectives in the literary humanities. This is already happening in the digital humanities, which are sometimes seen to pose a challenge to the traditional humanities. Artificial intelligence, of course, is the hot topic of debate now. And weighing the risks and gains of this world-transforming phenomenon has become a vital question. Speaking of creative destruction, the socioeconomic process by which old industries are destroyed as new models emerge, Yan Hu says uh, that about the debates that surround AI, chat, GPT, and so on in the literary domain. He says, and I'm quoting, the application of large language models like GPT-4 to literary writing has the potential to revolutionize the creative process, including new genres, styles, and forms of expression. However, it also raises important questions about authorship, originality, and possible bias and homogenization in AI-generated content. By carefully considering these questions, we can harness the power of AI to augment human creativity, foster diversity and innovation, and create a more inclusive and vibrant literary landscape, unquote. To negotiate this rapidly mutating field of digital technology and artificial intelligence, comparative world literature today must have the elasticity to accommodate these changes and to grow with them. In fact, rather than the polarization of the human and social on the one hand and the technological on the other, Some theories incline towards the view that technologies too are, after all, socially constructed. Instead of an either-or approach, it is through a collaboration between the humanities and the world of technology that we can probably best address the risks of knowledge being reduced to mere digital data or information, and draw the maximum benefit from what the rapidly evolving new technologies have to offer. To achieve this, though, and I'll conclude with this, to achieve this, though, we still need to recognize the centrality of human subjects in the literary humanities. We must also continue to acknowledge the crucial place of language, literature, and communications in the process of crossing the mental, linguistic, and cultural borders that divide our world. At this moment, we hover at the threshold of a radically transformed universe. And at this moment, the reimagining of comparative world literature can offer us a vital source of inspiration. Thank you.
Thank you so much for such an engaging and captivating lecture, ma'am. Thank you once again. Now, I must say it is my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Meenakshi Mohan, ma'am, who is residing in the USA, is a distinguished writer, scholar, art critic, children's author, painter, and poet with international publications to her credit. She serves on the editorial committee of Inquiry in Education, a peer-reviewed journal published by National Louis University, Chicago, Illinois. Additionally, Dr. Mohan holds the position of advisory editor of Conference, a prestigious publication based in the UK. Her literary accomplishments have been recognized with notable accolades, including the Setu and Panorama International Awards for Excellence in Literature. Her poetry collection, Symphonies of Life, garnered the Sudesh Kamra Memorial Award for the best first poetry book at the Bhasha and Beyond Literary Festival held in Pune, underscoring her multifaceted contributions to the world of literature and arts. And recently, the Relic, a notable anthology edited by Dr. Meenakshi Mohan and Santosh Bakaya ma'am, has recently been published by Puahan Publishers. Now, without any delay, I would like to request Dr. Meenakshi Mohan ma'am for her very open speech. Ma'am, please.
Thank you so much.
Okay,
Paramita,
Dr.
for such an
Paramita,
excellent-
before Meenakshi ji speaks, just one sentence I would say, Dr. Meenakshi, welcome to our university. Before you joined, I was actually talking about you, which is recorded. Maybe you can listen to the YouTube later on. I was talking about your work. And yes, the multiple books that she has edited, many of them I am also a contributor. In Relic, I am a contributor. So I'm very happy to meet you virtually today. I have been working with you, collaborating with you. So most welcome and glad to have you. After both of you have spoken, I'll give my comments about the papers. But now, we welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nandini. And I really appreciate what you are doing with this comparative study and collecting so many authors, writers, educators in giving their in talking about the comparative study part of the thing. And it's really nice initiative. Thank you so much. And Paramita, thank you for your elaborate introduction of me. And Radha, nice meeting you. And I follow you on your Hindi translation, Hindi poetry as well as English. So you have done, you are really doing great. And I really was very interested in, intrigued actually by, transcreation and translation. I haven't done much on that. I am a bilingual writer, but I write Hindi and English both, but I have never yet made any attempt to do transcreation yet. So, that is maybe something fascinating. So my study today is based on early childhood education because that's my area of specialty. The title of my paper is South Asian Literature in Early Childhood, a comparative study of melting pot and a rainbow of different colors in the American classroom. I wrote the whole research paper actually. So the abstract is this critical study examines the ideological dichotomy between melting pot and the rainbow of different colors as it manifests in South Asian literature-based early childhood classrooms in America. The melting pot idea promotes cultural assimilation, and the rainbow concept champions multiculturalism and cultural diversity. This study further explores how cultural inclusion serves as both a mirror of South Indian culture and, by extension, for American society, fostering positive identity formation and self-esteem, and is a window for all children, promoting empathy and cross-cultural understanding. The rainbow concept is not merely a trend, but a crucial component in helping young South Asian Americans navigate their bicultural identity while shaping a more inclusive American society. The scope of my study is given the abundance of information in the South Asian literature-based classroom. I'm focusing on Indian literature and studies for this research purpose. In my study, I'm defining Indian literature between the periods of 2000 and 2025 in the American school system, examining its recent trends and shifts and how it impacts children's development. This study employs the established sociological metaphors of the melting pot, which is assimilation, and the rainbow of different colors is cultural inclusion by comparing the two. There are some keywords I have used that you probably are aware of, but I just saw a title discuss. Early childhood is a period between birth to about age 8. During this period, there's a rapid growth in the brain and physical development. This period lays the foundation for future learning and development. And when I'm talking about South Asian, I focused on one of the schools' case study, and they had Indian, Pakistani, Bangladesh, Nepali, and Sri Lanka. So I've kind of focused on that part. And melting pot, I already discussed, called assimilation or unifying with the traditional classroom culture. The rainbow of different colors is inclusion of different cultures to give each child their own voices, identity. The other names for the inclusion concepts are mosaic and mixed salad. I have used, Reggio Emilia approach. It originated in Italy, but soon became quite popular in the early childhood classes in America. It is a child-centered educational philosophy that views children as capable, curious, and creative learners. It is based on the idea that children have 100 languages to express themselves, such as art, music, and play. The approach emphasizes strong relationships and collaboration among children, teachers, parents, and community resources. I have started my introduction with two case studies of two different classrooms. So first is Sheila's story. It was around Diwali time. 5-year-old Sheila came to the class wearing a lehenga and chunri. She was excited to share the clay diya she had brought from home, and she also wanted to show off her Indian dress. She tried to tell the class all the preparations her parents and grandparents were making for the Diwali festival. Instead of celebrating the class with this cultural Indian festival, Miss Linda simply told her to put the diya in her cubby so that it wouldn't get broken, and she folded her jewelry so it would not get dirty. She gently drew the class's attention by talking about the forthcoming Thanksgiving and how and why we celebrate it. Sheila felt a quiet sadness. Her festive spirit was dampened because she could not share her joy with anyone. Sheila sat down docilely with the other kids with an unfulfilled ache. The book in Miss Linda's classroom library are mainly from mainstream authors, and while there are diverse characters, their cultural backgrounds are not a central theme of the classroom. The class's mission is to foster a unified culture where everyone is treated equally, to minimize differences and to prevent potential conflicts. The underlying philosophy is that the best way for students to fit in is to shed their cultural differences and adapt to the dominant culture. And the next is another classroom scenario, which is Priya's story. Mr. Roger teaches at Washington, D.C.'s Early Childhood Research Center. The school adheres to the Reggio Emilia philosophy of teaching. All teachers are Reggio trained. The primary mission of the philosophy is child-centered, focusing on your voice and an emergent curriculum. The environment is the invisible teacher. The teachers are both observer and learners. Therefore, Mr. Roger already had the environment set up with the theme of Diwali festivals. He had prepared documents for all sensory hands-on learning activities in which children were involved. The massive mural on the wall was a colorful rangoli designed with children's artwork and stories around it. Children had shared their own stories with illustrations. They shared their stories at the author's chair, discussing what inspired their stories and illustrations, while each child in the classroom listened and asked questions after the stories were told. In one corner of the classroom, he had set up a light table with translucent objects in the colors of gold, red, and orange, and provided mirrors and flashlights for children to experiment with how light reflects and bounces. But today was a special day for Priya. The golden days of fall had fully arrived, carpeting the schoolyard in a symphony of brown and rust-colored leaves. But inside Priya's heart, it felt like a fireworks show. She had learned about fireworks during Diwali from one of the books. The 5-year-old bubbled with excitement, her hands held tightly by her parents as she walked into Mr. Rogers' classroom. The other children were already buzzing with curiosity. They had spent the past few weeks exploring Diwali. There was a special electric energy in the air, and everyone was looking forward to what Priya and her parents were going to do. Once they all settled down, Priya's father laid out some books on Diwali on the floor. Then he asked the children to select the book they would like him to read. Whichever book got the most votes, he chose that one. So the winner was Amma, tell, tell me about Diwali. This is the book. Amma, tell me about Diwali by Bhakti Mathur, and the illustration was by Malshri Somani. He asked the kids why they chose the book. So one kid raised his hand and said, I think I love the illustration. The other one said, this book is fascinating because I love fireworks. Priya, sitting next to her father, said, I love Indian festivals. We celebrated Holi here. Remember, we all had colors over us. The children chorused in yes, and one child said, my nana had to shampoo my hair to get the green color out of my hair. All children giggled and clapped. Priya's father smiled and said, but that was fun, wasn't it? All the kids said together, yes, that was a lot of fun. Priya's father said, now let's see what happens in Diwali. Diwali is also called the Festival of Lights. He started by showing the illustrations all on glossy dark paper, showing the stars and the lights of the fireworks. A sea of curious little faces was on him as he started the story in his sonorous voice. It was as if the stars themselves came down to the earth that night. The entire day was lit up with thousands and thousands of lights. It was Diwali, the festival of lights. It was pin drop silent, all eyes and ears to him as he continued. Klaka had woken up early, full of excitement, and worn new clothes with joy. Friends, uncles, aunts, and cousins streamed in throughout the day with good wishes and cheer. In the evening, all the children had lit up the house with rows of small earthen oil lamps and called diyas. Then the story continued to Ganesha, the god with an elephant head, and on his feet his pet mouse rests. The children's expressions were a mix of fascination, awe, and curiosity. But the story was becoming more magical as they heard about how Ganesh brings good luck, how good triumphs over evil, and how the goddess Lakshmi rewards her true devotees with fortune and health. As the story ended, there was a lot of questions. They were especially fascinated to learn how Hanumanji could fly over the ocean. Mr. Roger, who was sitting on a chair in a corner, said, kids, how would you like to act out Ganesh, Hanumanji, and Lakshmiji? Yeah, yay, that would be fun, all the kids said together. Mr. Rogers said, okay, we'll plan on that. And who will be the little mouse pet for Ganeshji? There were giggles and cheering. The story ended on a happy note. Priya's mother gave all the kids colorful scarves and they all danced in a circle, waving their scarves. Later, they had the opportunity to make diyas with air dry clay and then paint them the way they wanted with colors and glitter. All the kids helped Priya's mother decorate one corner of the classroom with their diyas lighted with battery operated lights. She made homemade mithais to share with the kids, taking their food restrictions into account. She put henna on each child's hands. Lastly, Priya's father projected some pictures of how Diwali is being celebrated. Later on, these Diwali activities took many forms, doing science experiments in making colors and with safe ingredients, doing dramatic play, Bollywood dancing, book reading, writing, creating music, and making batik greeting cards to invite parents and grandparents for the big festival days, where other South Asian cultures like Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, and Sri Lanka were going to present their arts and crafts in their stalls. It was going to be a big day for the school with dances, dramas, food stalls, henna applying, and fashion shows in traditional South Asian dresses. The classroom library was filled with books that featured not only characters from different cultures, but also delved deeply into tradition and stories such as Hot Roti for Dadaji by F.Z. Ahmed and many other books, as for example, Animal Tales from India and the Jungle Books. Priya Dreams of Marigold, Ganesh's Sweet Tooth, books on Raksha Bandhan and Holi. More list of the books are in the reference section. Mr. Rogers' philosophy is that the strength of the community comes not from blending everyone into one color, but from appreciating the beauty of each distinct color. Anthea Bell, in her book Comparative Children's Literature, refers to Paul Hazard, a leading figure in the field of comparative studies at a time when children's literature hardly existed as a field of study, who sets out to achieve an image of childhood to achieve a childish identity, the voices of children. She quoted Hazard, who wrote from a child's point of view, give us books, give us wings, we are willing to learn, but please let us keep our dreams. Theoretical framework on this one here, that's the next title. The melting pot. Historically, many traditional American early childhood schools operated on the melting pot concept, especially in the early to the late 20th century. The curriculum primarily focused on American history, often featuring festivals with a celebratory and national tone. The term melting pot was popularized by English Jewish playwright Israel Zangwill in his 1908 play, The Melting Pot. The play's main character, a Jewish immigrant named David Kihano, came to America with the hope that all ethnic and religious differences could be melted to create a new unified American identity, a culture that became homogeneous, a blend of these different groups, a new identity. It represented the American promise of a new life from old world prejudices. In the mid-20s, Dewey established a lab school in Chicago. It was an experimental school in which he believed that schools were crucial for social integration and creating a common democratic identity. His progressive education was criticized as an assimilationist practice where common identity referred to the dominant culture. W.E.B. Du Bois said that Jewish philosophy could relegate the ethnic population to lower skilled jobs. John Locke's theory of tabula rasa or the blank slate suggested that individuals are shaped by the experiences and education. He emphasized that the goal of education was to foster specific values, morals, and knowledge into a child's blank mind. Rousseau's philosophy, as outlined in Emile, focused on child in education in a natural environment. It was considered a form of assimilation as the child is molded to a universal standard rather than to their specific cultural context. Recently, the melting pot approach has been widely criticized, leading to the adoption of more inclusive education that allows children to express their own voices. The rainbow of different colors, child development and theories. The rise of own voices since the early 2000s has created a new landscape for South Asian children's literature, one that is deeply informed by modern developmental and educational philosophies. The shift from melting pot to a multicultural rainbow is not just a social change, it is a reflection of how we understand child development itself. Early childhood is a period of rapid physical and brain development, primarily occurring from birth to age 8. This phase lays the groundwork for all future learning, behavior, and health. A child's brain develops more rapidly in the first 5 years than at any other time in life, forming over 1 million new neural connections every second. By age 5, a child's brain has reached about 90% of its adult size. These connections, called synapses, are the communication pathways between neurons and are essential for a child's abilities from movement and language to problem solving and emotional regulation. Positive experiences in relationship with parents, teachers, caregivers, and in nurturing environment as well as exposure to meaningful literature strengthen these natural connections. Educational theories, particularly those from philosophers, educators like Piaget, Vygotsky, Erikson, Maslow, and Yuri Brenner, as well as Reggio Emilia philosophies, provide a strong theoretical basis for a plethora of new books that impact children's development, self-confidence, self-worth, and identity. South Asian children's literature, with its vibrant illustrations, rich cultural narratives, and often multilingual text, provides a perfect medium and tools for children to explore and connect with their heritage in a sensory and experimental way. Reggio Emilia's philosophy of the environment as the third teacher emphasized that children learn through 100 different languages, which can be art, music, storytelling, dramatics, and play. National Children's Research Center, an early learning hub for preschoolers, uses play-based learning. This method recognizes that children learn best through self-directed play. Own voices books offer children the cultural props and storylines they need to engage in meaningful dramatic play. Parents are also involved in their child's learning process, creating a community of learners in a joyful learning environment. Jean Piaget's cognitive development theory emphasized that children construct their understanding of the world through experience. Similarly, Vygotsky's social cultural theory stressed that learning is a social process, and that is where the parents and grandparents' involvement becomes crucial. The zone of proximal development helps them understand their heritage, language, and family values. Yuri Brenner's ecological system strengthens a child's microsystem, family, and school, providing a bridge between home, life, and the wider world. Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs places a sense of belonging and self-worth as fundamental psychological needs. Own voices, literature helps fulfill these needs for South Asian children. Excuse me. Excuse me. By showing them that their identities are valid and valued, seeing characters who are like them and share their cultural experiences. Excuse me. Sorry. Which is critical foundation for all other stages of development. Erikson's stages of psychosocial development, particularly the initial periods of initiative versus guilt, that is the preschool period, are directly influenced by own voices literature. There's a list of books in the reference section that could be a source of strength for young children to hold on to both their American and South Asian identities. Education and literature. Excuse me. Education and literature are intrinsically linked, as literature serves as a powerful educational tool to foster critical thinking empathy, and cultural understanding. Literature allows learners to explore diverse cultures and human experiences, broadening their understanding of themselves and others. Literature provides a language to describe feelings and offers a safe space for children to understand and process emotions, thereby supporting their social and emotional development. South Asian children's literature helps other children in the classroom as well as their parents and teachers by reflecting diverse cultures, promoting empathy, and breaking down stereotypes. By seeing a different way of life reflected in a story, children can expand their understanding of the world and their place in it. Mirroring in the context of literature is a crucial concept for both the child who sees themselves in a book, a mirror, and the child who sees someone different, a window. When other children read about South Asian characters, they are essentially given a window into a culture that may be new to them. This window then allows a form of mirroring to occur as they identify with the characters' universal emotions and experiences. Even if the cultural context is different, a child reading a book about a South Asian boy who is nervous about his first day of school can mirror the character's feelings of anxiety. This allows for shared human experiences that build a bridge between the reader and the character, developing an understanding of characters' internal world, their fears, joys, and love. The reader develops empathy. They see beyond the surface level differences in clothing, food, or festivals and recognize the commonalities that bind all people. In short, South Asian children's literature helps other children by using mirroring as a tool for empathy and understanding. It turns the unfamiliar into something relatable, promoting an inclusive worldview. So the last part is an awareness of one's cultural identity is essential for many reasons. Many people, especially children who do not have an awareness of their cultural heritage, consider being culturally different as culturally deficient. This deficiency can produce numerous damaging effects, including a decline in family values, an increase in crime, a widening of the parent child relationship, and a loss of cultural heritage. Remember the story of the little wooden puppet Pinocchio? In his insecurity about being different from the other children, he got involved with the wrong sort of crowd and got himself into all kinds of trouble. The world is now a global village. It is vital for children of all ethnic backgrounds to feel secure in their cultural identity. The support and strength of cultural roots give students the autonomy and confidence to succeed alongside diverse individuals and navigate their way through life in this complex world. Therefore, the successful South Asian literature is a must for the South Asian diaspora in America. It reinforces the South Asian children's self-worth and they can confidently say, "This is who I am." While this study focuses on the Indian American diaspora, it can offer crucial insights for educators in India and other countries by highlighting the universal importance of culturally relevant education. Educators in India can apply this principle by integrating a wide range of regional and community specific narratives into their curriculum, ensuring that children see their own lives and traditions reflected in the books they read. Just as a rainbow of colors is valued in the American context, embracing and celebrating India's rich tapestry of cultures in the classroom can empower students to feel seen and valued. It could also encourage children's authors and researchers to write more such books, which is really needed to spread the vibrant colors of the rainbow about society and culture. Jimmy Carter said, we have become not a melting pot, but a beautiful mosaic. Different beliefs, different yearnings, and different hopes and different dreams. Diversity is a tapestry of many colors, and each thread is a story waiting to be told. Let us weave a world where colors, every color shines bright. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for such a provoking and remarkable lecture, ma'am. Now, I would request Professor Nandini Sahu, ma'am, for a very valuable remarks. Ma'am, please.
Thank you so much, Dr. Paramita. I am extremely happy to have two very well-researched lectures by Professor Radha Chakravarty and Dr. Meenakshi Mohan. I thoroughly enjoyed the discourses by both of them. Of course, unfortunately, in the middle of the lecture of Dr. Meenakshi Mohan, my internet had some issues, so I could not hear a part of it. But anyway, whatever I could understand or I could hear from her discourses, I have taken down a few points which I am going to let you know now. Professor Radha Chakravarty, as expected, she talked about the textual cartographies vis-a-vis translation in comparative world literatures. And I always wanted Professor Radha Chakravarty to speak on Tagore because she has translated a few very seminal books on Tagore, which are creating ripples all over the world. Up to my expectations, she spoke about those translations, and then the influence of Tagore on anti-colonial writings was something that created interest, and I'm going to read a bit more about it. And then importance of mother tongue, reimagining language and literature, dialectical relationship between the various worlds and the various world literatures, and then transformative potential of languages. She pointed out that. And then literary cartographies and multilingualism, interdisciplinarity in world literature, mapping literary history. These kind of very important issues that she pointed out. Probably in Hindi University we can take up more research on those areas, and our faculty and students, whenever they have any doubt vis-a-vis the things that she discussed today, we can take the research and the collaboration further. Madam, we will need your support and help when we design the syllabus in the university for our comparative world literature. You answered to a few very important questions that were all the time running in my mind, like how does transnationalism in translation challenge the Eurocentric models of comparative world literature, especially when viewed through Tagore's multilingual and intercultural literary practices? I'm also a serious Tagorian. So this question was always in my mind, and this particular question in your lecture, and in which can explain our understanding of nation-bound or monolingual paradigms to include Tagore's role in mapping an alternative plural literary history. I was talking about Professor Radha Chakravarty's discourses, so she talked about interdisciplinarity and multilinguality, and also the idea of planetarity. That is something that a lot of new researchers are taking up. They are doing work, and then this is coming up in a big way in the syllabi of universities as well, in the literary theory classrooms. So probably the teachers of the university can take up some fundamental research on the idea of planetarity, and then we will get back to you. And then the dichotomy between knowledge and data when it comes to artificial intelligence, chat GPT, that we started talking about in the beginning. I so agree with you, Professor Radha, that these kind of immediate and quick fix methods will not help the researchers of comparative world literatures. Rather, we have to do a lot of textual reading. To compare two cultures, two languages, two literatures, one needs to do in-depth reading of the texts. And I so agree with your idea of research and pedagogy vis-a-vis literary humanities. And I'm sure that we will be enriched by your lecture. Please don't worry. The entire lecture has been recorded by the office. We will share the YouTube with you very soon, maybe tomorrow or day after. We will share the YouTube with you. And in the video, everything has been recorded, and we will continue this research with you. I think it's entirely my loss that I could not listen to the entire lecture by Dr. Meenakshi Mohan. Though I am not going to miss out on anything from the YouTube, I will listen to her carefully. Whatever portions from her lecture I could participate or I could engage with, I was very glad that she talked about children's literature. Not a single speaker in the Hindi University lecture series has spoken about children's literature till date. You are the first speaker who took up this very important subject. You know, if you come to the university syllabi of almost all the universities in the country, children's literature still is one of the marginal studies. You know, we have not taken it as a part of our mainstream literatures. I hardly find any university where there is an MA in children's literature. After listening to you, I'm more than inspired that in Hindi University, probably we can start with a certificate in children's literature or something, because West Bengal is rich with a whole to whole kind of nonsense verses and children's literature, then mystery and folklore and oral literatures vis-a-vis children's studies. We can start with that, and in due course of time, maybe we will be one of those universities who will introduce something massive on children's literature. You talked about early childhood education in South Asian studies. That is pretty important for me and all of us. Then ideological issues and debates, and a child's point of view. You know, children's literature, when you distinguished literature by children and literature for children, that was something very interesting for me. People confused between literature by children and literature for children, and also writers who are writing children's books, even they confuse about these two ideas. So you brought some kind of clarity into the discourse of children's literature, and we are grateful to you for that. And the theoretical framework vis-a-vis children's literature, yes, no literature can be presented to the MA or PhD students unless we theorize. So you talked about theorization in children's literature, the identity politics of gender in children's literature. I remember that I was in the syllabus design committee of a couple of universities, where in the children's books for teachers of children's literature, we had some kind of representation where children from Northeast India, or children who are dark skinned, or children who are differently abled, they were not represented. A kind of a group of children were presented who were quote unquote perfect, and mostly male. You know, out of the 100 illustrations in the book, almost 90 illustrations were boys and only 10 could be girls. So we pointed out in the Board of Studies meeting, and today you pointed out the identity politics of gender in children's literature. So I'm going to listen to your lecture entirely in the YouTube. I missed quite a bit of your lecture. Once I listen to you carefully, I will get in touch with you with all my questions and whatever queries I have. Once again, I thank both of you for being a part of Hindi University Special Lecture Series and sharing your research with us. We are certainly very, very enriched. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
So, as we draw this webinar on comparative war literatures to a close, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to our distinguished speakers, Dr. Meenakshi Mohan ma'am and Professor Radha Chakravarty ma'am, for sharing their profound insights and enriching our understanding of literature's diverse landscape. And thank you to our Honorable Vice Chancellor of Hindi University, Professor Nandini Sahu ma'am, for graciously joining us today amidst your undoubtedly busy schedule. Thank you, ma'am. And a special thanks to our very special participant today, the renowned writer and speaker, Sadhvi Chadha ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. And at last, thank you everyone who has joined today and our team Hindi University. Thank you once again and namaskar.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, then. So see you again. Bye bye. I'm coming to Delhi by the end of this month. Probably I will meet you, Professor Radha.
Yes, please, we must get in touch. Do get in touch with me.
Yes, of course. And Meenakshi madam, I will try to meet you in December.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, then.
I'm planning to come to you
Thank you.
in next year, so around February.
Yes, sure. Thank you. Namaskar. Bye bye.
Thank you.